Hello, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Doman Learning question and answer session. During this webinar at Doman Learning, we have parents that join from all around the world and ask questions about the Doman method, early learning, how to teach a child to read and do math at a very young age. And so wherever you are in the world, you can go ahead and type your questions into the comments box. Whether you're following this right now on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, you can type your questions into the comments and we will take them in order. Now, I always start off with the questions that have been pre-submitted to us by parents in the Doman Learning Parents Facebook group. Doman Learning Parents Facebook group is there for parents who have attended the Doman Learning online courses, like the Reading Before School course or the Math Before School course or the Gift of Knowledge course, and they want to ask questions to further their Doman Method program at home. So we're going to start with their questions. But if you're interested in getting your question answered, go ahead and type it into the comments box and we will answer them in order if we have the time. Now, a couple of quick announcements before we get into the questions. So the first thing I'm really excited to announce is we're going to be releasing a new online course called the Doman Baby Course. The Doman Baby Course. So this is going to be the first of its kind for Doman Learning because it is specifically focused on the first year of a baby's life and what parents can do to help their babies. So let me just first say, what kind of parents would be helped by the Doman Baby Course that we're releasing? Well, first of all, any parents who are expecting a baby, who want to be proactive in the way they raise their child, and they want to give their child stimulation and opportunity in the first year of life. The second are parents who have a baby younger than 6 months of age. So parents who have newborn babies and want to give them, everything they can in terms of stimulation. And then the third thing is parents who are interested in early sensory learning and motor skills because they want to raise a child who is curious, bright, healthy, who has a lifelong love of learning. So that's who the Doman Baby Course is for. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going to be in this course, which, by the way, has been a year in the making. I've been making it along with my siblings and my parents, Douglas and Rosalind Doman. So first of all, the course is going to have everything you need to know about how to develop early sensory awareness in babies and developing motor skills. So when I say sensory awareness, I mean improving seeing, hearing, and feeling. Those are the most important sensory abilities. A lot of people don't realize babies, when they're born, are functionally blind. They cannot see. They're functionally deaf, can't hear. They're functionally insensate. They can't feel. And as you can imagine, it's scary to come into a world when you can't really see, hear, or feel. Very confusing. And so we focus a lot on how to improve sensory awareness, but also how to improve motor skills. How do we get a child? What can we do for a child in the first 6 months of life to help them hit all those essential mobility milestones on time? So important for brain development. A lot of people aren't aware that if a child is not creeping on their hands and knees by 9 months of age, their chances of being diagnosed with a developmental disability goes up multiples, okay? So very important for children to hit those mobility milestones early on. We talk about that in this course. So the second thing we're going to be giving in that Doman Baby Course are videos demonstrating how babies can move and learn at a very young age. So these are going to be instructional videos where you get to watch babies doing these activities, one of the best parts of this course. Next, you're going to get our recommended list at Doman Learning of materials and equipment for newborn babies to do the Doman method successfully and joyously with them. And then last but not least, answers to your questions about what you can do to get your baby ready to be a reader, to get your baby ready to start learning math. We've got the Reading Before School and Math Before School courses, but sometimes parents will say, hey, I just had a baby. What should I do now in the meantime before I start those programs? Well, now with the Doman Baby Course, you'll know exactly what to do. So that is the Doman Baby Course. We're so excited about it. And I always like to tell parents, if you want to purchase anything on the Doman Learning site, any courses, any materials, you can use a coupon code, Spencer10. So you can see there the coupon code at checkout. It asks you if you have a coupon code. If you enter Spencer10, you get 10% off. All right, everyone, let's get into the questions. We got probably more pre-submitted questions this month than at any other time. Let me start with a question from Karina. I'll start by reading it out loud. So Karina says, my child is now 19 months old and doesn't talk. So no words, but the child makes sounds. My other child started to read single words and say words at 15 months old, and he is now 3 years old. So now I'm a bit worried about my second child, but I didn't have much time to do the program because of their different levels. I would appreciate tips. My firstborn son speaks fluent English, but I'd like to introduce German to make it not boring for him, since he can already read, but not my second. I'd like to know how to apply it with the second child. I'm just a bit lost and a bit worried because I wasn't able to do it consistently. Okay, Karina, great question. And by the way, the situation you're facing is very common with parents with two kids, like understanding where to focus time and attention. If I were in your place, the first thing that I would say is you always want to keep priorities in mind. What is the most important thing that we can be doing right now? And I would argue, because you've got the older child who started to read at a young age, and the younger child who maybe speech is a bit more delayed, I would recommend focusing on the younger child and teaching your younger child how to read. And by the way, the older child will benefit a lot from watching the reading program that you're doing with the younger child. I would begin with the younger child with the language the younger child is more confident with. So for example, if you feel English is a stronger language with the younger one, I would start the reading program in English. But otherwise, if you feel it's German, I would start with German. And it's a really good opportunity for your older child who's now 3, both to get a lot of good review and stimulation from watching the reading program with the younger sibling, but also because, you know, sometimes in life, especially when you have multiple kids, you can't necessarily give time to everything. And so you just have to decide, okay, what's our priority for our family? And like you said, with the older child, you were able to give some time for reading and it had results. Your child started reading. But right now, maybe your younger child needs a little bit more focus to help speech development. And so I would just say, focus on your younger child, and your older child can always watch and will gain a lot from that process. It's also important, you know, whenever in life, whenever things feel a little overwhelming, you want to simplify, right? And so probably for right now, just focusing on the program for the younger child is going to be a strategy that you're going to be able to do more consistently than if you tried to do 2 programs with both kids. And this is something we do very often with multiple children. I hope that is helpful. All right, I see questions are coming in already on Instagram. I'm beginning with pre-submitted questions here from parents in the Doman Learning Parents Group. And then if I've got extra time, I will get to everyone else's questions. All right, my next question comes from Liba. And Liba says, I want to teach a foreign language, but I don't speak it. How can I use the reading program to teach the language? Note, I believe that the child, so mom is saying, will my accent cause issues for the kid learning the language? Okay, so let me start by taking the second part of the question first about accent. So a child who gets to hear a language spoken by native speakers will not be influenced by a poor accent, and I'm not saying your accent is poor, but let's say a poor accent that parent speaks, right? And we see this all the time, right, in the world where immigrant family moves to a new country and the parents speak with a thick accent, and the child learns to speak the language in the correct accent of wherever they're growing up, right? That's a very typical thing. And that's because children are linguistic geniuses. Their brains are developed to pick up the correct sounds of the languages spoken in their environment. So the first thing I always say to parents is, if you're worried about your accent in a foreign language, just give your child the opportunity to hear native speakers in that language. Let them watch videos of speakers in that language. Let them listen to music of people singing in that language. And if you're lucky enough to know people who speak that language, always tell them, speak to your child in that language. My father used to do this all the time when we were kids. If we bumped into someone who spoke Italian or Spanish, and they started speaking in English to me, he'd go, no, stop. Please only speak to my child in Italian or Spanish. They need to hear it, right? Or Japanese, right? So he really wanted us to hear those. And by the way, that has really helped. When I speak Italian or Spanish, I'm often told by native speakers, like, wow, you speak with such good, such a good accent. And that's because I got to hear native speakers when I was young. So that's the me addressing the second part of the question. The first part of the question where, okay, you want to teach a foreign language to your child. So when you're teaching a foreign language to a child, interestingly, the approach you're going to take is very similar to the reading approach that we take in the Reading Before School course, where imagine for a second if I'm teaching English as a foreign language. Well, what I'm going to want to do is present a picture to the child of something and tell them what it is. I'm going to say bear. And then I'm going to show the child the written word on a separate card saying the same thing, bear, right? So my child is getting to learn that's what a bear is, right? And here's the word bear, right? Or, here's a beaver, right? And then the word beaver. Right. So, yeah, if I was teaching a foreign language, what I would do is, first of all, if fortunately, the foreign language you're teaching your child is in the Doman learning materials, then you don't really need to come up with all this stuff. You can just use the Doman learning materials, right? So I know we've got Italian, Spanish, a lot of languages there. So you could use those. If you're making your own homemade materials, my advice would be use the Doman Learning English materials, translate them into the other language. So you would look up what's bear in Spanish, right? And maybe you see, oh, it's oso, right? So you could still use the picture from the materials, and then you would just make your own card in the other language, which in Spanish it would be oso, right? So that way you could, it requires the least amount of work necessary to teach that foreign language. But as I said, if you're teaching one of the languages that we cover in Doman Learning, it'll make your life all the easier. All right. Let's go on to the next question. I've got a question here from Daniela. Daniela says, when we're traveling or can't find a quiet moment, should we skip lessons for the day or adjust somehow? For example, if we're out all afternoon, should we show sets fewer than 3 times or try to complete them all in the morning? Really good question. So, obviously, whenever we look at something like trying to do the program in a time where you've got a lot of, you've only got a limited amount of time. It depends a little bit on the situation, right? But what I would try to do, for example, if you're out all afternoon, if it's possible for you to do all of your sessions in the morning, I would do that. It's perfectly fine. It's a very common thing. I remember even when I was a young child, my mom would do this sometimes. She would say, we're going swimming this afternoon, so we're going to do our entire reading program in the morning, get it done, and then we'll have the afternoon off and we'll go out. Okay, so that is perfectly fine. It's not an issue to try to get those 3 showings in the morning. Now, on the other hand, let's say it's impossible for you to get all 3 showings in. Let's say you're like, I can only get in 1 or 2. Is it better to do 1 or 2 showings in a day or not at all? I would say better to do 1 or 2 showings. So In short, do what you can do, but if it's possible for you to get it all done in the morning, then do that. Good question, Karina. All right, we've got another question here. The book says to start with 1 set, but the Doman Learning Course says to begin with 5. Why is there a difference? Very good. Good question. So, I always like to say, sometimes parents will come to me and they'll say, hey, I noticed there are some differences between what is said in the book and what's said in the course. And I want to make it clear, any change that I put in the course, there's a reason for it. For example, in the book, it says to put breaks of 15 minutes between sessions. In the course, I say 5 minutes. And it's just because 15 minutes may work for a full-time parent who's home all day, but for a parent who might work, that might be impossible for them to put 15-minute intervals. So I say do at least 5 minutes. Okay. So when it comes to answer this question, should you start with 1 category or 5 categories? To be honest with you, you could do either. Both ways work. I just said to start with 5 categories because I feel it's easier for parents to remember. If I start with 5 categories a day and I do each one 3 times, then all I have to start doing is add a category after 5 days and take out a category, right? That's what I discuss in the Doman Learning Reading course. And I just maintain 5 categories every day. So I felt that was just an easier way for a lot of parents to absorb it. But this is a good question. And in the end, what matters the most is that parents and children are successful. So if you found the approach in the book was your easiest way to layer in and gradually build up to the program, that's fine too. All right. Another question from Karina. Karina says that she's introducing the programs from the reading course, the math course, and the gift of knowledge course. And she asks, should I teach all 3 at the same time? If not, what order do you recommend? So yeah, I'll answer this quickly. Oh, I said Karina. Sorry, I meant Daniela. Daniela, you can do all 3 at the same time. Absolutely. Yeah, it's not like you have to take an approach of like you get one of the programs done and then you move on to the next. No. Many parents do all 3 programs simultaneously. If you have the time and it's joyous, then absolutely do it. Next question. I've noticed that my baby gets distracted when we use images with words. Is this due to the session length, a lack of interest in the topic, or something else? Should I change the subject, remove pictures, or shorten the sessions? Ooh, good question. And I have to be honest with you, I don't know what the reason is because each kid is different. If I had to guess, it's probably the length of the sessions. Maybe for your baby doing, 5 picture cards, and the 5 word cards, maybe that's a little too much for them. So, for example, I was speaking with a family with a 20-month-old earlier this week, and I told them, you know what, let's go down to 3 pictures and 3 words in a category. So 6 cards in total, and that seems to work well for that family. So probably my guess would be reduce the length of the sessions and see how it goes. Next question. What should I do when my baby gets distracted during a session? Should I try to regain my baby's attention? Should I stop the session completely or attempt it again later? Is it okay to try more than 3 times a day if some sessions are interrupted? Great question. So, and by the way, I don't know if I've ever gotten a question quite worded this way, but it's a good one. So let's say I'm showing materials to a child and I'm saying bear, right? Beaver. And then all of a sudden I notice my child is looking away. All right. First of all, I'm going to stop showing the materials in that moment. Like I'm not going to keep showing cards if my child's looking away, because if they're not looking at it, what are they gaining from it? And I'm probably just I'm going to calmly wait and try to bring their attention back to the cards. I would say something like, John, do you want to finish the category? So I'm even phrasing it as a question, right? John, do you want to finish the category? Would you like to see these? And in most cases, the kid's going to be like, oh yeah. And you're going to say, great, let's finish up. Cheetah, or Puma, yeah. And you run through the cards, right? That's going to work well for most kids. Now, let's say you're your child looks away and you say, hey, John, you want to finish these cards? And you can just see they're completely distracted by something else. They want to do something else. At that point, you put down the cards and you come back later. Okay. And in that case, yeah, you might sit down more than 3 times a day in order to get the whole showing in. But again, most children, if you ask it in a calm way, they'll be like, yeah, sure, let's finish the session. And please note, I'm saying calm, right? Because I'm going to show you what I don't want. I never want to see a parent go like, hey, John, look here, look at the cheetah, look at it. That's that. If you're doing that, that's only going to bring stress into the session. You don't want that. So be calm. Ask your child if they want to come back to the cards, and most of the time they will. Good question. All right. I've got some questions from Jay. Jay says, in the books, they mention that parents enthusiastically teaching over 100 dots. How high have parents gone? Jay, it's true. There have been parents who have gone over 100, but they don't go over 100 because we tell them to. These are parents who have gotten super ambitious and gone over 100. I mean, I think I once saw a parent who had a card with 160 dots on it, something like that. I do not recommend that because I don't think it's worth the time in you actually doing that. Okay. So that's parents going off and doing something they want to do that they're passionate about, but stop at 100 dots and then move on to the next parts of the math program. Okay, next thing. If you were going to teach over 100, Jay is asking, how far would I go? I wouldn't go. I don't think it's worth the time. Hopefully that's a quick answer to your question, Jay. Now, when I'm teaching the numerical symbols, right, and I'm not sure if I have cards here, right, but if I'm teaching the numerical symbols on cards, I will often go over 100. Sometimes I'll like to show children the symbols for the numbers of 10,000, 100,000, 1 million. That's perfectly fine. But with the dots, I don't do that. Okay, how small the dots can be at different ages to still be distinguishable. Do you have a summary chart? I'm not sure if I completely understand this question, to be honest, but I believe that the dots are something like 1.8 centimeters in diameter, something along those lines. So I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, Jay. I think it's something like that in diameter. Again, if you get the Doman learning materials, you don't have to worry about this. You just print out the cards. I would, if a parent came to me and they said, Spencer, I can only buy one material from Doman Learning because I don't have the resources to buy more materials, but I want to do all the programs. What should I buy? I'd say buy the math cards because it's going to save you the most amount of time and your sanity as well. I'm not saying if a parent could only do one course, do the math course. I'm saying if you plan on doing all Doman courses and you can only buy one set of materials, I would say buy the math. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Is it possible to have music playing in the background 24/7 for a baby? Do you think it's a good idea? No, I don't. Just straight up. No, I don't think it's good to be playing music 24/7 because babies have poor hearing and music is wonderful. Music is great. All children should get to listen to music, but I don't want music playing constantly in the background. First of all, for babies who are only really able to focus on one sound at a time, constantly having things playing in the background can actually interrupt their attention from people speaking to them. And so the best thing with a baby is really to have one sound at a time for them to focus on. So if you're going to turn on music to play for them, that's fine. But if you want to talk to that baby, I would turn off the music and talk to the baby. So that way the child can hear clearly your voice and the language that you're speaking. Background sounds can also exhaust babies, okay? Because they have to tune in their hearing, and that requires a lot of focus and attention on their part, which is very tiring. All right. Oh, so Jay is asking, should I put an album on repeat? No, I would not do that. I would select, when playing music for a child, especially a baby, I would be selective about the music that I'm playing. And I would also, as much as possible, tell the baby what music I'm playing, right? So I would, if I had a baby, I would say, we're going to listen to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star by Mozart. And then I would hit play. And then when that piece comes to an end, I would give the child a break instead of having music constantly playing in the background. By the way, just as a side comment, I do have to say that even though I'm always talking about stimulation, it is important for babies to also have quiet time too. It's important that children and babies are comfortable in silence, that they don't constantly feel like they need to have stimulation in the environment. So it's important for that reason as well. All right. Now we've got some questions from Koss. I know that some people are still waiting on answers on Instagram. I'll be getting to you in a minute. Koss says, we have already shown our baby thousands of Doman cards, and we've noticed the time that our baby stays interested is getting shorter. Now we can show the same set only for 3 days with 2 showings a day. It's hard to do more because the baby gets bored. Should we keep showing sets only 6 times or try to find a way to increase the number of sessions? Koss, what you are describing is incredibly common. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but in the Reading Before School course and the Gift of Knowledge course, I actually say that children, as they learn more and more, they learn faster. And often the frequency that they are shown materials needs to come down. So the answer is absolutely do 6 times if that's what your child is interested in. And it's a good thing. It means your child is taking in information faster. Koss says, what about background learning? For example, when my baby is playing on her own and I read something out loud in the background, some studies say that babies can still pick up things this way, even if they don't seem interested. What's the Doman family's opinion on this approach? Yeah, I think that, I often tell parents to read to their children, even if they're not 100% sure if the child is fully focused and listening, perfectly fine to do that, as long as it's one thing at a time. Right? It becomes problematic if you're reading out loud and there's music playing and there's TV on in the living room, then it's chaos. But absolutely. When teaching facts with Doman cards, Koss is asking, it's difficult to read the entire fact in just 1 second. It usually takes me 5 to 10 seconds, depending on the length of the fact. Often the baby looks at the card for 3 seconds and then looks away. Should I continue reading the fact after she looks away? Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And the other thing that you can do, Koss, is if you want to shorten the facts, like here I've got the card for Sally Ride, right? So for example, on this card, a lot of the facts are short, like Sally Ride was the first woman to fly in space, right? That's a pretty short fact. But there's also a fact here that it says Sally's job was to operate the shuttle's robotic arm and then release satellites into space. That's longer. So if you wanted to just shorten it to say, Sally operated the shuttle's robotic arm, make it shorter, perfectly fine. The facts Koss for certain kids, even sitting and listening for 5 facts can be a lot. Probably of any part of our program, it's the most likely for parents to have kind of a tough time keeping a child's attention. So I like to shorten those sessions a lot of the time. Maybe I only do 3 facts and I shorten the facts just to make sure the child is happy and focusing. Koss is asking, and this is an interesting question. I've never gotten this question before. What about perfectionism? Is it considered a problem or even a kind of disease? Well, first of all, my first question would be, are we talking about perfectionism in parents, in people in general, in children? I definitely wouldn't consider it a disease because a lot of the greatest people in the world are perfectionists, right? Perfectionism, I think, like everything, has good aspects, right? Like a desire for good quality. There's a good side to that. And then there's also a negative side. It can be exhausting. It can be stressful. It can be sometimes time wasting, right? If you're trying to focus on doing something perfectly rather than just good. We have an expression in English that goes something like, never let perfect be the enemy of good, which means, sometimes when we strive for perfection, it would just be better to do something good and get it done than something perfect that never happens, right? You never get it done. So I think perfectionism can be destructive. I see a lot of, if I look at it from a parent context, I see a lot of parents who are hard on themselves, right? So they're like, I never get all these sessions of reading done. I'm a failure as a parent, and that's very destructive because actually it kills their motivation because they feel like a failure constantly. And then they don't do something which is good for their child, which is reading, because they quit, right? So sometimes they look at everything like a diet, if that makes sense. Like if I don't do it perfectly, it's a failure. I think that's a very negative way to look at life. A lot of people don't achieve things because they view things in that way. And yeah, I personally think that you should view life in a way where if I'm doing something good, even if it's not quite at the level I would like to do it, if I'm doing something which is good for my child, something which is good for me, that's good enough, right? And each day I'm going to come to each day with this approach of it's a new day, okay? And I'm going to kind of have a short memory, I think is very, very important. I hope that's helpful. All right, let's look at questions. Okay, Annabella is saying, do I have to wait until the end of the story to ask reading comprehension questions, or can I ask questions about just one sentence? Annabella, I'm not sure if I totally understand this question, but let me give it a try. So if we're talking about a child who reads a book independently and you want to get a sense of, does my child understand this content? You could do it after a single sentence or a page, right? So let's say there's a homemade book and on that page, it says, elephants live in the continent of Africa. And you wanted to ask your child, what continent do these elephants live in? Is it Africa or is it Antarctica? You could do that after a single sentence. That being said, most parents do reading comprehension questions at the end of a book, but it could be done at the end of the sentence. For any parent who just heard me answer that question and they're thinking, wait a second, what am I supposed to be doing reading comprehension? This is really for children who are advanced readers. For most of you who are just starting our reading program, this is a bit of a ways off. All right. Let me see if there are any other questions. Okay, I have one quick question here in Spanish from Cloudy that I'm going to answer. But before I get to that question in Spanish, I just want to announce for everyone that, at the very beginning of this Q&A, I talked about how we're going to be releasing something called the Doman Baby Course, which is an online course for parents of babies on what you can do in the first 6 months of life to really provide a child with stimulation and opportunity so they hit all of those essential milestones in the first year of life. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned, follow Doman Learning's pages, and you'll be learning more about that very soon when we release it. Okay, I'm going to quickly answer a question in Spanish for Cloudy. Hola, Cloudy. Tenemos muchos niños con escoliosis que hacen el método Doman. Y sí, el programa puede ayudar la movilidad, la espasticidad y por algunos niños también el escoliosis. ¿Ok? Si quieres más información sobre el programa, tenemos una página para español que se llama Doman Iberoamérica y tenemos un representante que puede responder a sus preguntas en español. Y también tenemos un programa para baja audición. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this Q&A. We'll be back here next month. Yeah, look forward to seeing you all soon.